Sorry for the inconvenience, sir. Like 5 minutes to make sure to join all the participants.
Sure. Okay. Uma, is it got disconnected and again restarted with you, right? I don't see Dr.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It was disconnected and it got restarted now.
I don't see Dr. Narasimhan. I think I'll call him.
Climate change and biodiversity. The link between climate change and biodiversity loss has long been established. Biodiversity is what has long been established, makes the planet Earth a special one. It is the climate and environment of this planet that makes life possible. Yet we do find this diversity narrowing day by day at a slow but a steady pace. A pleasant climate that our previous generation enjoyed will be longed by the next generation soon. Just like Terry Swearingen, an American grassroots environmentalist, once said, we are living on this planet as we have had another one to go. So what can we do? As our beings whose past actions had these dire consequences, how can we bring back the peace and pact among all biotic and abiotic elements on Earth? I can't wait to delve deeper into this, but first I request Nandini to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Akka. Let's hear it for a sociable welcome. I am Nandini from the Beacon Computer Application Department, and I extend a warm welcome to you all on behalf of our Environment Club. I extend my hearty welcome to our supportive faculty coordinators, Mrs. K. Gayatri ma'am from the Department of English and Ms. Janani ma'am from the Department of Psychology. And above all, I welcome our beloved participants in this climate conversation. We are truly delighted with your presence. I am honored to further welcome Mr. P. Natarajan, the founder member of Namma Ooru Foundation. P. Natarajan, founder and chief volunteer of Namma Ooru Foundation, is a leader and never gives up till something is accomplished. He has a master's degree in electrical and computer engineering and is an IT professional with over 20 years of industry experience. He gave up a successful career in the US to become a social entrepreneur to follow his passion, environmental issues. The organization was started 6 years back. From then on, they have made their mark inch by inch by spreading solid waste management basics in Chennai in various places like schools, colleges, restaurants, communities, and individual households too. Today, they have to their credit 3,500 plus households that manage their waste, 20 gated communities, 3 schools, 2 colleges that are marching towards the zero waste goals, and 1 restaurant that has never zero waste generated in their restaurant. They have also signed up as a CSR partner and executed projects for a few corporates in Chennai. We are glad to have you here and feel grateful for this collaboration, sir. Let's dive into the discussion of today's topic soon, but before that, let me tell you about our guest speakers. Ms. Madhubanti Sadhya has graduated in law from the University of Calcutta, having completed her master's in law from NUJS, Kolkata with 2 gold medals to her credit for topping the university. She has pursued her doctoral studies from NUJS and is awaiting the award of the doctoral degree. After working in a research project on medical negligence and consumer protection commissioned by the West Bengal Judicial Academy, she was engaged as a program officer of the Central Child Rights NUJS, established in collaboration with UNICEF. She also has publications to her credit in the fields of medical law, international trade law, and environmental law, We welcome you, ma'am. Dr. D. Narasimhan has graduated and obtained PhD from Madras Christian College in Chennai and is specialized in biodiversity, taxonomy, ethnobotany, medicinal plants. He has published about 60 papers in referred journals, 60 in referred journals, co-authored 3 books, a guidebook on common trees of Chennai, on ethnobotany, and a compendium on flowering plants of Tamil Nadu. He has taught UG and PG students for about 25 years and has been a member of several expert committees and advisory councils of state and national levels. He is also awarded Dr. V.V. Sivarajan Gold Medal for taxonomists by Indian Association for Angiosperm Taxonomy for the year 2008 to 2009. We welcome you, sir. The stage is now open to the guest speakers.
Okay, thank you, Nandini, for that wonderful introduction of our guests. And thank you, Divya, as well. And I would like to start the session with a big thanks to the management of Shaswan Jain College and the principal, Dr. Padmavati Madam, for giving us this program, to host this program, the climate conversation for the month of April. And I'm so glad to have Madhuvati Madam and also Dr. D. Narasimhan in the panel, and we are going to have the very important conversation. So before we get into the session, I would like to give a background about why this climate conversation in the first place. Because people need to be aware that climate change is real and it is happening. But unfortunately, most of us or most of the people are not aware of the things happening around us, the natural calamities, the floods, the wildfires, all that are happening because of climate change. And there are various aspects around the climate change. This climate change is not just one thing. Like, for example, when floods come, we work on it and set it and gone. It is a chain reaction. So one climate change is happening, and there are so many things are getting affected. And one such thing is biodiversity. So it is very important to bring it to light that climate change is real, and there are various fields or various aspects of climate change is there, and we call subject matter experts in various domains and bring them on board and listen to their ideas and thoughts about how the climate change is affecting various things. And one such thing is biodiversity. And let us hear it from the experts. And I would like to start with Madhuvati Madam. Madam, thank you very much for accepting our invite and being here. And I would like to start from you. Please enlighten us about what is biodiversity in first place, and why do we need to link biodiversity and climate change? If you could, highlight us about this, that will be great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. I would like to first and foremost thank Mr. Natarajan, Namma Foundation, as well as Shaswan Jain College for organizing this important talk. And it is very, very important that we start talking about this, because climate change is happening. It is real. There are countries all over the world who are trying to make something of it and, enlighten us about it and make us a little more conscious, because if we don't realize it now, it will be too late. And so I'll start with the thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and have a word with the students of this college here and all the others who have joined. So if we have to put it in very simple terms, biodiversity is basically everything that we see in and around us. It could be plants, animals, microorganisms, the ecosystems of which they are a part. By ecosystems, I mean the entire ecological cycle of which they are a part. It could be not necessarily just the terrestrial plants and animals and microorganisms, but even marine and aquatic ecosystems form a part of the biodiversity, and also how they interact with each other. How do these biodiversity or the different plants and animals, they interact with each other within their systems, and how they impact each other. So basically, if we give it in very simple terms, all kinds of biological living resources, whether it be plants, animals, microorganisms, and the entire cycle of which they form a part can be very simply defined as biodiversity. So it is not only the plants that we see, but even the animals are a part of it. Even for that matter, even if we stretch it to that extent, maybe we can even include humans to be a part, because we are also a part of the ecosystem. So biodiversity or ecosystems have very, very important role to play when we talk about climate change, because ecosystems affect climate in many different ways. For instance, the more forest cover that we have, the more carbon that is getting emitted from the burning of fossil fuels, or say even from the release of different industrial activities, can be absorbed. So biodiversity helps to act as a sink to absorb all the extra carbon that is there. More than that, biodiversity, or say forest covers, also help to maintain a lot of atmospheric cycles that happen. So if we have vegetation, if we have plants, if we have good forest cover, or if we have what is called very popularly carbon sinks, which help to absorb that carbon from the atmosphere, then also what happens, we increase the amount of water that is released, then we lead to clouds formation, and then the cloud give us rain. So that also in a way helps to maintain the climatic conditions. So there is a very close interlinkage between how we maintain our biodiversity and how the climate and the change in the climate remains, it does not get too drastic. It is also very difficult to define climate in a very simple term. But if I call about climate change, what is climate change? The rise in temperatures, the rise in sea level, the forest fires that we are seeing every now and then across the world. So these are different indicators that the climate is changing, and it is changing at a very rapid rate. And the interlinkage with biodiversity again is, the more we maintain and preserve biodiversity, the effects of climate change would be lesser.
Wow, that was a very comprehensive. And thank you for enlightening, because even I myself didn't think of the aquatic, biodiversity. That is another thing, because a lot of things we are sending it to sea, in sometimes purifying, and sometimes without cleaning it up, we are putting it back to the sea. So again, there is an ecosystem there. There is a biodiversity there. Yes, thank you very much, ma'am. I will go to Dr. Narasimhan. Sir, thank you very much for being here. And about our Dr. Narasimhan, whenever we want any insights on biodiversity, we always reach out to him, and he is so kind enough to help us in understanding things better. Sir, in your words, the same question: what is biodiversity? Is there anything different definition you have? Because you both come from a different background and different generation. So I would like to hear from you as well. What is biodiversity and how this is interlinked with the climate change?
Biodiversity is same, whether it's for a lawyer or for a botanist. It doesn't change much. But the thing is, I think she has explained it well. But I would put one more addition to whatever she said. And one thing is the variety that we see across living organisms, right from bacteria to the big animals, including human beings. But it's also the genetic variation that occurs within the organism that is also included in the biodiversity. Because you see, the brinjal is not, there are several varieties of brinjal. So all this is also part of biodiversity. And similarly, every animal is genetically different. Now people are coding their genetic fingerprints. So that is also included in the biodiversity. So it occurs at three different levels. She said, of course, at the organism level is one thing. Then also the genetic level is the next thing. Genetic level, in fact, is the basis. That's what creates the differences among the organisms. And then at the ecosystem level, because this is where it provides a habitat and niches for the animals and for the other biota to live. So at the three levels, the biodiversity can be explained.
Great, sir. Sir, I know that you are also in the as a board member in Tamil Nadu Biodiversity Board. Can you please help us understand what is the role of Tamil Nadu Biodiversity Board, and a similar board like this being operated all over India as well?
Yes, because this is a organization, Biodiversity Board, is an organization under National Biodiversity Authority. That's the national level authority. And under this, as per the Act, every state should have a biodiversity board. So likewise, our Tamil Nadu has also a biodiversity board, even Karnataka has a biodiversity board. All of the states have their own boards. But this is a regulatory authority and an advisory authority. What the main function of a national biodiversity authority, and the same thing what is done by biodiversity boards also. The biodiversity boards, the function is mainly to regulate the access to resources, how people use resource, plant resources, animal resources, whatever it is. See, for example, some people may want seeds of an important crop for breeding program abroad. So they have to necessarily go through National Biodiversity Authority. And if it is getting collected from Tamil Nadu, they also have to get a permission from Tamil Nadu Biodiversity Board. Because why we insist on this? For example, let me tell you an example that has happened recently. See, one of the company abroad collected soil samples. You may think, what is there in the soil? Soil has numerous bacteria. And all these bacteria are going to be very important genetic resources, either for breeding or for other purposes. It is collected and it has paid money, because there is a way in which we charge from National Biodiversity Authority. It has paid money to National Biodiversity Authority because the soil samples are collected from the Tamil Nadu Agricultural University. An amount has been shared to Tamil Nadu Biodiversity Board. This amount we have recently given to Tamil Nadu Biodiversity Board, Tamil Nadu Agricultural University. So it involves a lot of activities, the Biodiversity Board. Mainly it's a regulation. We get a lot of traders now. A lot of traders are there in Tamil Nadu who sell medicinal plants for various purposes. Whenever we get applications from, of course, Madhuvanti might know, under the biodiversity law, there is a section called benefit sharing. You have to share benefits when you use the bioresources on a commercial basis. For research, of course, a non-commercial research is something which the country does not charge. But for commercial use, for example, Laurel Company comes for plants that are used in shampoos and skincare. So, and there are lots of other companies that comes to us for many more medicinal plants. So these are issues where people are using our biodiversity for commercial purposes. When they use for commercial purposes, a section of the money that they earn is to be shared with the concerned boards and concerned areas. So that is why we insist on this benefit sharing. And this is where the role of biodiversity board comes. So whenever it comes to Tamil Nadu, we check which are the areas these plants are located. And based on that, whatever money that gets either on our own or probably distributed by the biodiversity authority, we give it to the concerned people. And also probably if there is no benefit claimer is identified, we use it for general purpose of conservation.
Wow. Wow. Well, sir, a lot of information in just for a few minutes. So, dear students, hope you're all watching and taking notes, because this is what you don't get very often. You don't get a chance to interact with people with such impeccable knowledge, and you will get to know more information. So please take notes. And Madhuvanti madam, I'll come back to you. Sir said something very interesting, the benefit sharing part. And because of I know there is already a benefit sharing, there is a law in place. What are all the medicinal plants that should be sold, or what are the soil sample that can be sold? All that laws will be there. And especially the climate change is happening rapidly now. Is there any change in such laws happening, or is the law helping in any way with respect to climate change?
To be very frank, I mean, the point that Mr. Narasimhan raised about the act that we have, which was drafted in 2008, and many of our environmental laws, including the Biological Diversity Act of 2002, is something that we have drafted because we are also a party to the Convention on Biological Diversity. It's basically an international instrument to which India is a signatory. I'm sure the students are aware that there are several other such international instruments to which India is a party. So this was this law which we had brought in 2002. And this law, as Sir correctly mentioned, is just primarily tries to regulate the access to biological resources. And once access has been granted, what will be the nature of benefit sharing. But this law does not talk much about, say, climate change per se. But I would want to add there that we have something called the National Biodiversity Action Plan, which, if anybody is interested, would be available on the NBA's website, National Biodiversity Authority website. That National Biodiversity Action Plan does talk about climate change and what kind of species of or plants should be given more emphasis so that we can adapt to climate change or rather mitigate climate change also to a certain extent. But the law per se does not talk much about climate change, but it does talk about whenever we are trying to give access. Suppose there is a company which says we want to extract X species of plant from this particular area. Usually the biodiversity boards are also supposed to find out from the local level bodies which we have near the local self government bodies, which is created at the local level, like say the biodiversity management committees. Now, if they say that, see, this plant is running out or it is almost going to get extinct, so they will not give permission. So if you look at it from that perspective, then maybe yes, this act also to some extent helps to conserve, because they will not allow you to extract any and every plant that you would want to. But otherwise, this law indirectly helps in the conservation of biodiversity and also then indirectly linked to climate change. But the National Biodiversity Action Plan definitely talks about how can the country look towards mitigating the effects of climate change by identifying the kinds of species which would help us to maybe cope with the changing climate.
Great. Thank you. That's National Biodiversity Authority and National Biodiversity Action Plan.
Yes.
Students, hope you're taking notes. Okay. All right. Now, I think we are too much getting into the law side, and we want to get into more on how it is affecting and whether we can put something in, do something about it. Sir, a question to you, your favorite subject. We are in Chennai, and there is a great, wetland called Pallikarnai Marsh in Chennai, and unfortunately, it is being abused very badly from the past, I think, 20 years. And sir, in your experience, is there any way we can rehabilitate the Pallikarnai Marsh? And also, is there any plan from the government already to, because there was already an ecosystem available or a biodiversity available in the Pallikarnai Marsh, and because of it was used as a dump yard, now the biodiversity would have been affected. And I don't know whether we can do some research on how much it got affected, what are all the species we lost. All that we will not have any clue as a commoner. But can you please let us know, is there any research going on in terms of what is the biodiversity loss because of dumping of trash in the Pallikarnai Marsh? And also, is there any way we can rehabilitate the marsh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Natarajan. It's a question very relevant to the local issue, Nama Uru, right? It is Nama Uru. So I think we have to understand what's happening in our neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
Before I answer this question, I think for the benefit of students, I would like to share one information. Both me and Madhubanti said about National Biodiversity Authority. Do you know where is the headquarters situated? It is in Chennai. Most people don't know the authority is located in Chennai, including many college professors and students. They do not know. So, and that's an information for you to be known. And you can visit the authority, and they have a good library. You can talk to people if they probably have. If you get some appointment, you can talk to people, and that is what is probably will engage you into this dialogue much better and much closer. And they also take interns regularly. That's for you students. They take interns, and many of the interns either work with the authority or work with the different boards. So they get an experience. Interns not just from botany zoology side, interns also from commerce, intern also from other branches, because there are many number of inputs that are required. So, and that's why you should also know, please keep watching the National Biodiversity Authority website. Whenever they announce for an intern, they may have an exam and participate in that. They will also pay you for the internship. It is not something free, right? So like many of the internship that is attended by college students today, where they pay and go to the internship, This is an internship that is paid. So please watch it and go to that. Coming to Padikarane, not only Padikarane, I think we have misunderstood the entire wetland ecosystem. Most of the, see, Padikarane is a natural marsh. It's it's a floodplain. It's marsh and a floodplain where the flood drains and spreads before it probably joins the sea. And these floodplains are much more important in an ecosystem because if you interfere with the floodplains, you are losing several ecosystem functions of that kind of an ecosystem. And that is what we have experienced in the years earlier. The floods, if you interfere with the floodplain, because it holds large amount of water when before it enters into the sea, it keeps the water for some time. So, and if that function is lost, water will enter into residential areas. And another thing is, where it holds large amount of water, many of the matter that is there in the flood also gets settles down. So that purifies the water. Then the floodplains are also very important ecosystem from the point of birds and from the point of other ecosystem functions. And when you pass Pallikaranai, you'll also feel a change in temperature, at least to a minimum level. So that is the effect of floodplains. And floodplains also recharge water. Groundwater is recharged by floodplains. So, and there are many more ecosystem functions. But unfortunately, we have, as you said, we have meddled with this ecosystem for quite some time. But the awareness came during the 2015 floods. So immediately people started thinking about the floodplains and started acting upon it. So what we did was there are a lot of research that has been done, particularly one organization in Chennai, of course, you may know, Care Earth. Care Earth has done plenty of research, and even we have published a book. Right? We've also contributed to that. Published a book called Paradise Regained. That's about entire Pallikaranai marsh, a pictorial book, which is published by the Urban Forestry Department that was in charge of this area. And information is available in plenty about plants, microorganisms. We even did the survey on phytoplanktons and this thing. Everything, there is information is available. And but the thing is, we just pass by this information. Everybody who drives by this Pallikaranai, I mean, just like a car that is going through on the road, we also pass by this information in the newspapers or anywhere else when it appears. We don't give probably the importance that we should be giving. So that's an issue. And today, of course, Pallikaranai is declared as a reserve. It's an RF, reserve forest, where it's a marsh, it's a forest. I would call it as a water forest. Right? So, and that's important to recognize because I recognize all lakes and other things which have plenty of vegetation as water forest. So it is not a land forest, it's a water forest. So that is also to be realized. So Pallikaranai now today, of course, getting now it is under the Wetland Authority of Tamil Nadu. They have established a separate wetland authority for Tamil Nadu, and this wetland authority is taking care of Pallikaranai. And Pallikaranai is now under watch. So now they're already, what has happened. But now, of course, we are a bit more critical about saving Pallikaranai.
So, sir, another part question with that is, when we rehabilitate the place, will the biodiversity that we lost, will it come back, or how that is going to be, sir?
Yeah, that's a question. How we rehabilitate is the matter. See, we are doing a lot of things, but without understanding of nature. Right. One example is the lake cleanups. I've been encountering with a large number of organizations who dug up lakes, who clean up lakes with bulldozers and just throw away all the good soil underneath and along with the plants and everything just on the banks and say we have cleaned up the lake. A lake is an ecosystem, like Pallikaranai marsh. Any wetland is an ecosystem. An ecosystem need to be cleaned with all its probably understanding of an ecosystem, and we should provide the same kind of an ecosystem after cleanup. We don't look into this. Now we have started treating the wetlands as storage tanks. Right? We want water to be stored there, and we want a lake to be strengthened and beautified for the urban dwellers to walk on it and to see the water. And that's what we probably claim as lake cleaning. But lake has an ecosystem, provides space for large many number of organisms, such as birds, such as fishes, and such as other microhabitats. So, or and large many number of water plants, aquatic plants. The aquatic plants today, if any one of the college students, fortunately, botany students are now not interested in field work, unfortunately. And this is something which, when somebody wants to show them, this is what is water lily, or this is what is probably another aquatic plant, where do you take them? We have lost many such habitats in and around this place. Madhavaram Lake is one of the beautiful place. We have lost it for due to restoration of the lake. Now, large number of alien plants have invaded. So that is the effect of some of these things. Either we have a tank which is with only water, or we have a tank with a large number of invasive plants. And that is not the purpose of these things. And in the process, many of the native fishes and other kind of native species will disappear. And we've examined in many number of places. And this is a great disaster that is happening in terms of our own biodiversity. And what we do instead to grow fishes, we introduce alien fishes like katla, rogu. Well, these grow quickly and provide food for people and provide employment opportunities, provide economic incentives to people. That's fine. But in the run, they do a great damage to native biodiversity. They eat up all the native fishes, including our famous viral fish, which is liked by most of the people in Tamil Nadu. It is a freshwater thing, and that's almost equivalent to any of the sea fishes. And now this is disappeared in many, many lakes because of introduction of the alien fishes. They eat up the young fishes, and you don't have them surviving now. That's a major issue today. So it's a dynamic, we have to understand the dynamism of these ecosystems. We cannot look at it only from one point of view, from human aesthetics or human economics. We are just a part of the system. And there is much more to understand about the ecosystem of a lake or a wetland.
Wow. That was a great insight, sir. Because these days, whenever you talk to any, because of social media and all that, this weekend I go for lake cleanup. This weekend I go for tree plantation. All the youth are on their go. But whether I don't know, but rightly you said there is a science behind when you clean up a lake. There is a science behind, and so many things we need to look into before we go touch that. Thank you, sir, for that excellent insight. And Madhuvanti madam, similar lines. So tree plantation. So we go and plant this. That's a even when I was a child, there was always that fascination about. I went and planted tree a lot, and we will be happy about that. So is there anything we need to consider as a commoner when we go for tree plantation? Kindly please let us know.
Yes, definitely. I mean, tree plantation is also, I think it is very, very important, as Sir mentioned about even say lake cleanup. And whenever we are trying to deal with, see, one of the ways of mitigating climate change that has been, greatly acknowledged all across the globe is afforestation and reforestation. So basically, if there are no forests, you plant more trees. And if there are already lands which have gotten degraded because of deforestation, you start again trying to put trees back on those areas. But the problem that has happened is the kind of trees that we are planting, because there are certain trees, primarily not only with respect to animals like say fishes, even trees. If we are trying to bring in non-native varieties of trees, that is not going to help the biodiversity. Because there have been certain drives of plantation drives, even in Karnataka, where we have seen it was even, it had come out in the papers as well. Now, it also affected not only the other plants which were maybe trying to take a shade. I mean, we don't have all trees which are going to grow right up to maybe say 6 feet, 7 feet. We also have shrubs which sometimes survive under the native variety. So there is already an ecosystem that is built. So when we try and introduce non-native varieties into that ecosystem, it disturbs that ecosystem. Not only the other plants which were growing maybe underneath these big trees, sometimes even plants, even animals stop visiting. For instance, in Bangalore itself, I think we were having certain areas where the great Indian bustard, that is a bird which used to frequent a particular area, locality. But once the trees that were planted, were changed, they never came back. So that again affected the ecosystem. Another problem with afforestation drives that we do is many of the trees that are planted, say if they are done by the forest department, then what happens, certain plants which are, or rather certain varieties of trees that are favored are the ones from which you can earn something. In the sense, those trees which will give you maybe, which can be sold as timber later on. Another thing is sometimes there are certain varieties of trees which take up a lot of water. Say for instance, acacia is one which is a water guzzler. So if the purpose of planting the tree was to maybe help in regeneration of biodiversity or helping in climate change, you do not want it to affect another aspect, say taking away all the underground water. So how are we helping it? So what kind of tree we are planting, where we are planting the tree, all of this is also very, very important. So many people who are enthusiasts want to just go about and do it, but they do not look at the scientific aspect of it. Another problem with anything to do with the environment is, I think this is something that the Supreme Court has also said time and again in several judgments and decisions, that we are taking a very anthropocentric approach. Anthropocentric is, anthro is human. So anything that favors us. We are not taking an ecocentric approach. So we should slightly start taking an ecocentric approach, even when we talk about any kind of planting drives. And we should have people who understand how, maybe botanists, maybe people who are from the field. We should not do anything just because we think that is right.
Fantastic. So just a tree plantation, maybe as a good thing or a good Samaritan, I want to go and plant, but I need to be very cautious. Students, hope you're all listening. And there are a lot of aspects you need to look into before you go for or plan a tree plantation drive. Sir, coming back to you, and this is about going a little in depth into the recent reactions because of climate change. The wildfires are happening all around, and recently in Australia there was a wildfire, and about 60,000 polar bears were dead. And the first attempt, or even last week, there was a wildfire in near Vandavasi in Tamil Nadu, where there was a mountain got fire, and the news I heard for a few seconds, and they said a lot of medicinal plants were gone because of the fire. So that much importance was given to that wildfire. And they were talking only about in case of human lives lost, or some animals that you can see lost their lives, or some medicinal plants. But on top of that, there are a lot of other microorganisms are available. So in terms of these kind of wildfire happens. Is there any way, for example, is there any action or plan from the government how to say there may be a disaster management department whenever there is a wildfire happen? How do we recover that place, or restore? Not restore is not possible. How do we rehabilitate that place to bring back the ecosystem or bring back the wild animals? Can you please let us know anything on that aspect, sir?
See, we should differentiate wildfires that are happening in India, particularly in South India, and the wildfires that happen in either in Australia or Canada or California and other places. Because elsewhere, the wildfires are of a natural phenomenon. It's part of the ecosystem, because the kind of trees they have are highly inflammable trees like pines, eucalyptus, and other kinds of trees, which have a lot of ethereal oils that can immediately probably burn. So, and that may happen to natural reasons. So that's totally different issue. So that there, the wildfires are not happening because of human interventions. But in India, particularly either in the Eastern Ghats or in the Western Ghats or in other mountains elsewhere, it happens mainly due to human interventions. Because, and also the management practices, that is very important, especially you referred to Vandavasi wildfire. Why wildfires happen in a dry areas like this? Vandavasi is not a very wet area. It's a dry forest. Why it happens in a place like that? That has to be understood. See, usually in these hills and hillocks, there is a grass that grows, which is a native species of lemongrass. The lemongrass, all of you know. which we put in tea and flavor it and drink it. And there is a wild lemongrass that grows all over the hillocks in Tamil Nadu. In earlier days, these lemongrass was harvested and then used for thatching by people. Today, we forgot about thatching. We don't use for no more thatching now. We all have cemented roofs or tiled roofs and things like that. So grass has gone out of thatch. So when the grass is left in the forest, this lemongrass also has oils. So it can, when it dries up, it can easily catch fire. So even a bit of even a speck of the fire can easily probably light up. So that's an issue in the our forest. And that is why the traditional managements are also necessary. What we have done is, in terms of probably putting law ahead of our traditional practices, law has taken over now. No, nobody should enter into the forest. No cutting of resources. Nothing should be done. So that we have to regulate these things. So we have forgotten that act of regulation. And in fact, even earlier days also it was regulated, but now we have a very strict, and courts also sometimes intervene and say nothing should be removed from forest. So that's also an extreme attitude towards traditional managements. So we have to understand what is happening on ground, what has happened on ground, and we have to set right some of these things. So if you leave the grass on the ground, you see a lot of grass on the ground, that is sometimes very dangerous for the forest. And that is what catches fire. The same thing, if you remember the Kurangani wildfire, the same thing is the reason. So the fire happened because of a lot of ground grass, which is left unharvested, and that catch up fire is. So, and either the forest department should harvest and sell it. There is a lot of demand for this grass. It is not that it's a waste grass, right? One incident is recently, in the sense of a few years ago, from Tiruvannamalai hill, the large number of these grasses were harvested and taken away in lorry loads to Bangalore, right? It is harvested from Tiruvannamalai and taken to Bangalore. When the forest officer inquired, it seems these grasses is taken away for a multinational companies to build up thatched heads to give an eco-friendly appearance. Underneath, they can sit tea or probably use their computers, laptops, all kinds of things. So it is still probably now it has become a fashionable area, not a necessary area for rural. So our rural setups have changed, but our urban setups are equally changing in a reverse manner. So there is a revenue that can be gained out of it. So it can be harvested because we treat things as a waste, right? The people in many of the forest department, they think it's not really useful, but it is useful. So that's one thing we have to learn. And in Tamil Nadu, most of the fires are human centric. They are induced by humans, by accident or sometimes by incident. We also had a practice earlier where we light up a patch of grass. So when we burn a patch of grass, it produces fresh grass. And this fresh grass was necessary for grazing, right? And many cattle used to be grazed. Now we have stopped grazing in the forest. Of course, for good, that's a different issue. So, and see, these traditional management practices were keeping certain things under control, right? We also have to understand how traditionally it is managed. It's also a kind of management practice, right? And these management practices, of course, now we have a completely have to rethink about enforcing certain rules and regulations, how to bring in these traditional management practices about forests, on forests. So, and I think we need to interlink cultures, management, law together. And what we did is we have linked management and law, but we have forgotten cultures.
Interesting, sir. Sir, from you, or since you are being in the part of the Tamil Nadu Biodiversity Board, is there any amendment we can do to the law so that this, as you said, the culture part, even tribes will be still living there? No, sir. In some part of the mountains and hills, so they may be having a lot of knowledge. In the recent Tamil movie, also they highlighted about the rural community where they have a lot of knowledge about the medicinal plants. So, is there any way we can do something about it, sir, to incorporate this particular aspect into the law?
No, law is already probably having to conserve this traditional knowledge. What they see when even the Biodiversity Act, what it talks about is bioresources along with associated traditional knowledge. That's a standard phrase that is being used in Biodiversity Act, right? Bioresources along with the associated traditional knowledge. So that means it treats these two together as one unit. These two are not separated. When there is a biodiversity, there is always an associated traditional knowledge, whether in a village or in a tribal area or even an urban area. So there is a lot of traditional knowledge that is available. And only thing is, when we enforce, we have to link these things. But we cannot bring these laws in Tamil Nadu Biodiversity Board because it is an entirely different body.
Okay.
The body that can effectively bring these things is especially conserving the traditional lifestyles. Because when Madhuvanti mentioned about the CBD, right, Convention on Biodiversity, Biological Convention on Biodiversity, this is something which is very important, where they say you not only CB, one of the Article 8J particularly mentions, you not only have to conserve the traditional knowledge, you also conserve necessarily the lifestyles of those traditional people. Unless you make them live in their lifestyle and unless you conserve the environment for them, the traditional knowledge also will be lost. If you bring a tribe from a forest and put them in a Madras or Chennai, I think it's the complete environment is different. You will lose the knowledge. That's exactly the same thing that has happened in many places. And we forcefully do sometimes. We think these people are not useful to the department, forest department. They are detrimental to forest department. We forcefully shift these people. So, and in fact, they are part of the ecosystem. That's one thing. The effective department that can bring in some of these things is the forest laws, because the forest laws is the one that govern the forest, whether people inside or probably the other protected areas, the biodiversity, it is the forest law. Biodiversity law does not supersede Forest Act. I think Madhuvanti also can say better because she's being a lawyer.
Yes.
I tell from whatever little understanding I have on law, but she being a lawyer, probably she can throw a better light on this.
Yeah.
So Biodiversity Act does not supersede, and in fact, when the law is made, they always say this law does not supersede any other existing law,
No.
right? So that is what is the standard saying.
Yeah.
Right. So and so Biodiversity Act has limitations with regard to this, but forest law can probably do a much more to conserve tribals as well as their traditional knowledge and their environment.
Wow. Great, sir. Great. Thank you so much, sir, for that information. And Madhuvati, madam, I'm coming back to you. The similar lines, there is the recent war between Russia and Ukraine. Again, a lot of bombing happening in Ukraine, and definitely there will be biodiversity loss. And I don't know whether how they are going to recover from that, and how that biodiversity there is going to be restored. Is there any international forum or a body like UN body available? Of course, they have rehabilitating for the war victims and all that is there for the humans. Whereas a lot of animals are being affected and a lot of biodiversity loss happened. Is there any international forum available to look into this aspect so that we can work on that to bring the biodiversity in balance?
To answer that question, to be very frank, if it is within any particular national jurisdiction, the Convention on Biological Diversity also acknowledges the fact that a sovereign nation, or any nation for that matter, has sovereign rights over all the biological diversity that is within that particular country. So basically, if there is anything that is happening in India, the Indian government has the right. So while we acknowledge the fact that most environmental concerns, even for that matter, the loss of biodiversity, has transboundary implications. So it's not something that just because the biodiversity is getting lost there, it's not like only Ukraine or Russia is going to suffer. Technically, it will transcend the borders, and the effect may not be felt immediately, but it will be felt over time. But if you have to talk about an international forum, then probably it would be the Convention on Biological Diversity and the different parties who are a part of it, the nation states which are part of these bodies. Another body which could even talk about biodiversity loss, because it is so very linked to climate change, could be the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework on Climate Change. And we also have the recent COP26. So whenever we are talking about climate change, I'm sure biodiversity would be another angle which would even come in. But apart from that, I mean, these would be the main conventions which would be talking about biodiversity loss. But as I again mentioned, the problem that we sometimes face, or where other nations cannot put too much pressure with respect to biodiversity loss could be because the sovereign nation has the right ultimately. But having said that, we also have under international law where certain states have been sanctioned because of transboundary pollution. So say because there is biodiversity loss and there is a lot of pollution in the air which is getting affected and other countries are getting affected, other countries can definitely say that, you know, this is not something that we expected because our biodiversity or our environment is getting polluted because of things that have happened in your nation. But in situations of hostilities, things take a different turn. Also, I would also wanted to add about what Mr. Narasimhan was talking about the forest laws. Of late, now we have recognition of traditional forest rights under the Forest Rights Act of 2006, where we are recognizing the rights of scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers within the forest. So we are also slowly, the government is acknowledging the fact that traditional knowledge is extremely important to maintain ecosystems because they have been maintaining it for generations. Even on biodiversity, when we talk about biodiversity, one story that we keep coming back to is the Kani tribe story. They were the ones who knew how to use Arogya Pacha. So because they are the natives there, they are the ones who've been dealing with these products, they know best. And slowly we are going towards that. And even we have other ways of working with the forest or with traditional knowledge with institutions called joint forest management committees. So they are a part of the panchayat or the gram sabha, and they also have membership from the forest department. So they work together in ensuring that what are the kinds of trees that would be planted, whether they can go ahead and access some kind of forest produce from the trees or not. So slowly we are trying to acknowledge the fact that traditional knowledge is very, very important. And another important aspect in the Biodiversity Act that we have is the People's Biodiversity Register, the PBRs, People's Biological Register, that everybody is trying to build at the grassroots level. So the biodiversity management committees are supposed to go out in the neighborhood and take information from the people, the local people, about how have they traditionally managed different kinds of biological resources. So that is again somewhere where we are trying to go back to the roots and learn from the traditional ways of life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for giving a lot of information. And now it's at 6 o'clock. We planned from 5 to 6, but we started 10 minutes late. So is it okay if we extend it for next 10 minutes?
Yeah, no issue, no issue.
Yes.
Yes, sir. How about students?
No issue, sir. We can extend it.
Okay, thank you. So we are almost coming to the end of the session, and a lot of things came up right from various laws, biodiversity law, and then Forest Act, then Wetland Act. I'm not sure whether the students would have heard all these act in the past. And also like the traditional knowledge, the touching that Dr. Narasimhan was referring to, and how our change in lifestyle changed the ecosystem, right? So we need to start thinking on those lines. And sir, as a closing remarks, I read in an article that there are about 200 species are becoming extinct in a day all over the world. And similarly, thousands of species are getting extinct in a year. And that is all again contributing to climate change. Again, whenever I say the species, my mind is always going towards the species on land. There is aquatic species also. They are becoming extinct. I'm not sure whether we even know that many species existed, whether we recorded all the species. So, is there enough awareness among the people and among the government on how to deal with it, and is there any mitigation or any action plan for this? And as a commoner, what is that we should do? Because we don't have an command over how the forest law should be written, unless some of the students here become a lawyer and specialize in forest law. I don't think we have a say. So as a commoner, what is that we can do? And from the government side, what are the things happening for this crisis? Please shed some light on that, sir.
Okay. The thing is, there are a lot of things are happening from the people side. Because if there is a pressure that is coming either to the court or to the government or to the policymakers, it's only the people and the interest groups. Today, fortunately, we have very many interest groups that are on ground, acting on ground, and probably doing something on ground. And that is welcome change that we have, either in Bangalore or in Chennai or especially in Maharashtra, anywhere. We have a large number of groups that are today acting on it. And one thing that they realize is spreading the knowledge or spreading this awareness and information to people, particularly students and to other people. So there are a large number of training programs that are happening, large number of probably awareness programs that are happening. But only one fact about any of these awareness programs, any of these things. See, let me tell you an example. We all understand the importance of butterflies in the ecosystem. Without butterflies, the pollination may not happen. And in fact, butterflies probably are millions of dollars worth. Because if you want to pollinate a fruit tree, flower by flower, imagine how much labor it can be done. In fact, people are doing it in some places, right? And but it's a huge cost. So a butterfly does it without any effort. Of course, it takes its benefit, but it provides another benefit to people. So that's the link that we have to understand. So instead of for learning butterflies, we don't need to have a thing. Just now, what I've done is we have cut down all the roadside vegetations. That's where butterfly forage. Anybody who's a walker, a regular walking person on the road, will understand there's large number of plants which butterfly forage. Then clean up and plant only ornamental plants, which butterfly may not require. Right? So this is the common sense that we have to apply whenever we do something on ground. And similarly, tree plantation, that Madhuvati also mentioned. Tree plantation. Tree plantation is an area where we are doing major mistakes. In the sense, planting any tree is not a matter. And in fact, there are a large number of research papers that are appearing today. Haphazard plantations and unthoughtful plantations do much more harm than good. And many papers have already been published on this, where in fact not providing conducive environment to haphazard plantations. And now our tree plantation is towards targets, 1 million trees, right? Like 10,000 trees. We don't have to achieve anything by tree planting. You try to give something good to the environment and thoughtfully do something good to the environment. And we don't take it into native trees. As she said, Bangalore is one of the victims for invasive trees, the alien trees. And when I lived in Bangalore, I understood this problem. I said, problem of the Bangalore is both people and trees are alien. So that is what I interpret Bangalore, right? But of course, Chennai is something which is good. When we started this campaign on native trees for our Chennai, people immediately supported it, including the forest department, including the NGOs and newspapers. A lot of people came into our support, and there are a lot of articles that are written. Today, many people ask us for advice, what kind of trees could be planted, right? And I freely give this advice to many people. Whether they acknowledge or not, that is their ethics. But our ethics is to spread the information so that we do it. And see, there are trees that are very effective in dry areas. See, each ecosystem has a set of trees. You cannot plant the same tree everywhere. And example, Pungam tree, Pungamia. That's a tree, is a beach plant. It's a seashore plant. And of course, it provides shades, it provides a lot of other benefits. There's no point in planting only Pungam everywhere in Coimbatore, in Trichy, right? And it is not something that is probably needed. So we have to plant trees of that soil. That's what we are saying. So trees that suit the soil, because a tree is not only providing the birds and other things a habitat, but is also providing bacteria underneath the soil, a food source, right? So that is important for us to understand. We don't forget about the underneath biota, but we also talk about only above the soil biota, right? We forget about the soil, the beneath the soil biota. That's very, very much important for us to understand. So in Tamil Nadu, if you want some statistics, there are 1,420 trees. Entire Tamil Nadu has 1,420 trees. How many trees we can get it in the nursery, native trees? right? That's a question, of course, I put forward to many people, including Forest Department. They say, no, no, we have, of course, they came in, they always their answer is in protest. But I say, I know your nurseries, but it is not more than some 20 or 25 trees at the most. But what happened? At least you keep, if not 50%, at least 30% of the stock in your nurseries, right? Whereas private nurseries are doing it. There is a nurseries in Kerala, nurseries in probably elsewhere in the state. Private nurseries are doing a very good job on this, right? I don't know about Bangalore. Are there any good nurseries? There are, of course, there are some nurseries which do keep native trees, but many of the commercial nurseries are only ornamental plants because that's what people like, right? So we have to also educate people about aesthetics. The aesthetics is not just beautiful flowers. The aesthetics is not just beautiful forms. The aesthetics also the eco sense, right, suitable for ecology. That's also an aesthetics, right? You can view aesthetics from different points of view. So we need to understand. We need to make them understand about aesthetics, also about our officials, right? So that's is important in terms of tree planting. And there are a large number of people now, of course, including students who come to us for advice, for suggestions. So we provide suggestions. So these are the trees you plant in these areas. So, and this information is also available elsewhere. We fail to look up for information. Now, of course, we have come up with a compendium, as the person who introduced me said. That book is, of course, not an online. It's a printed book. But probably our next edition is going to be an online edition, which provides you information about most of the native trees and their distribution, right? And another issue is how we can contribute to biodiversity conservation is not encouraging many alien plants in our garden. Of course, we can cultivate tomato, chili, all these things. They are also alien plants because they do not spread on their own and then become a big forest or big invasive aliens. At the same time, when you encourage some of these things, one example I've seen in Maharashtra, to encourage students to sow seeds, they've given flower seeds of alien plants, particularly the marigold family. Right, there are another. So Mary, and when I was driving through one of the roads, I saw entire hill is with beautiful flowers. It looks beautiful, but it is not about plants, right? So and sometimes if they invade, right, if they spread on their own, and it's very difficult to eradicate them. That's what we are now facing. The eradication of invasive species is going to be very difficult, either in the forest or elsewhere, right? Simacurvel is one of the issues, and probably wattles is another issue. We are facing a lot of issues, and there is also a legal angle to this. Supreme Court has said nothing can be lifted from a protected area. Most of these invasives also occur in a protected area, right? So if you lift it, you are violating a Supreme Court order. So, and of course, you have to go get a permission from the Supreme Court to do this. And this is an issue. So there is also a large number of angles to this. And we have to understand the conservation and tree planting and in total. Not that tree planting is bad, but haphazard tree planting is definitely bad. If you plan and do a good tree planting, that would serve the ecosystem and the society far better.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, again, insightful comments as a closing remarks. And Madhuvanti madam, your closing remarks, please. As a commoner, what are the things that we should look into when we want to combat climate change with respect to biodiversity?
So I think as, I mean, you were mentioning about laws, and also as Mr. Narasimhan mentioned about, being informed. When I'm talking about information here as students, I think you all have very, very good role models in, say, Malala Yousafzai and even Greta Thunberg. You can see how old they were when they tried to do something and change things. I'm not saying you become activists, go out there and try to change the world, but please be aware of what is happening in your vicinity. Say, for instance, you see that there was an open park which was right next to your college or your home, and you see that that is getting encroached. Maybe there is some building that is coming up. If you know that it was a public park, you have the right to go and ask your municipal corporation to figure out what is coming up there. Because maintaining of green spaces in cities is also very, very important, because they will help to act as carbon sinks. So as individuals, I think we should be conscious of what is happening in our areas. If we see that these green spaces, be it open parks and playgrounds, which also let some amount of vegetation to thrive, if they are getting encroached, please try and find out what is happening. If you can take the help of everybody in the locality to at least raise some consciousness so that people ask. Because we have seen there are several cases that have been filed in the Supreme Court and various high courts, which have been driven by people. Because we think that whenever we talk about law, we think, oh my God, it is so different or it is so difficult. But the concept of public interest litigation itself is, giving the public the right to voice their concerns. So if you think you have a lot of people behind you, I know maybe one or two of you cannot do it, but there are so many citizens groups now which are working in the field to preserve open green spaces. So if even if they are not working in your locality, at least if they are working in some other locality, let them know so that they at least raise their voice against encroaching upon these green spaces which are there in your vicinity. Because if you do that, maybe the corporation will get a little more conscious, and maybe they can stop or may not stop, but at least they'll know that the people are aware. So awareness is very, very important, and know what your rights are. Because nobody should be able to take them away from you, because it's very easy to tell you something if you are not aware. But if you're aware, you can at least refute and say that, no, I know we as citizens have the right to open green spaces, so you cannot encroach upon them. But before that, you should be aware of what your rights are.
Thank you so much, and for that wonderful 1 hour, a lot of insights, a lot of information that we got, and it's very enriching information. And once again, thanks to Dr. Narasimhan and Ms. Madhuvanti Sadhya for accepting our invite and being here. And now I will hand over the microphone to Divya to take it forward. Any question and answer? Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. That was a very interesting and informative and eye-opener session. As participants, if you have any questions, you can ask, and you can also post it on the chat box. Sir, Needu KV
Yes.
has asked, most students do not get interested in environmental related internships, even if the actual work they do is something close to their career plans as compared to something like Big Four. How can that be changed by students ourselves, sir?
See, I think maybe Madhuvanti can also add up what I'm going to say. As a teacher, I was teacher for nearly 30 years in a college. So as a teacher, my experience with student is you cannot teach environment in a classroom. We do have environmental science. You all learn environmental science as a compulsory part of your syllabus. I hope you agree with that. Many of you, undergraduate students, do have an environmental subject, environmental sciences, as a foundational course in your syllabus, whether you are a BCom, BSc, whatever degree that you study. It's a foundational subject, or all people should learn as a result of Supreme Court order, right? So that's a Supreme Court order. Now, every state government has implemented that. We do have that subject in our syllabus. And if you remember in your own, I'm not blaming only one college. It's every college does it. And it's also, if you remember how students learn it, we learn it in a very, very superficial way. We don't have any experiential learning about environment. So if that is brought into our culture, experiential learning about an environment, just like said, if you want to look at butterflies, just walk around. Don't look up only the net and some beautiful pictures with books. That will not give you an idea. Just walk around. See what are the plants that a butterfly sits on it. See what it does, whether it lays eggs or whether it sucks nectar. Just observe. That's an experience. So, and that kind of experience is missing. So today we are comfortable. We want comfortable learning. We don't want any hardships in learning. We don't want to walk. We don't want to do field work, right? And so it looks like I'm blaming people, but it is not so. Our attitudes toward learning has changed, right? Earlier, if there is, I mean, most people, right? Most people, and even many of the aspects that have to live with people also have changed today, right? For example, even the sociology people have now are doing only corporate sociology. They're not doing the other sociology. So there are things happening, and if you look at these changes, and you can catch up with individuals. Now, I don't see it as a setup. Now only individuals are living. So if you catch up these individuals, unite interested individuals, you can set an interest group or you can set an active group. What it requires is just a small group to start this work. You don't need a big change. That every change that has happened in the world is through an individual or a small group that is thoughtful and that is active, right? And that's what we require. We need to create these small groups. Maybe if you're a commerce student, you create a small group, maybe just 2, 3 people in a commerce department. Or if it's a computer science department, just create 2, 3 people interest group in a computer science department. And when these two join together and discuss, they can make big changes. And this is what we need, right? We are very particular about our academics. Academics is dry academics, not actually a live academics. And you should probably make it much more live by linking it to your surroundings, right? A commerce can link it to like what's happening to red sanders trade or what's happening to medicinal plant trade. Is there anything that is taught to you in the commerce subject? No, you learn about these all these softwares and other things and other laws. But are we looking up exactly if you're asked to do a project? Do you visit a medicinal plant market or do you visit a Mylapore market or probably any other market to study what's happening in terms of natural resource trade? Right? We don't. Right? We don't. Our thing is only companies. Right? We are turning towards corporates. There are a lot of things that are happening on ground. Right? For example, how natural resources are marketed. There is one person from in Coimbatore who studied MA Tamil literature. He's selling greens, Kirakara, right? And this greens shop is selling very well, right? He communicates to me to identify some of the greens. So there are, and people also want scientific information. So there are changes, and you need to look at from that point of view if you want to make them really come into the environment things, right? And I would also admit it is the teachers who made the subject very, very dry, right? By teaching in a way that is totally. And what we do is you read the subject in this topic. This is the book that is available, and writing a textbook for environmental science is the worst accident. Right? Is the worst accident. People read few chapters and you take up your question papers, right? I can understand from your smell that's what you also do it, right? Generally, the thing is, and you go through all question papers, these are the questions that often appear. Okay, let's prepare an answer for this. But that's not understanding of the environment. Environment is not from old question papers. Environment is fresh. Every day it is fresh. Environment is outside your classroom and textbook. Okay.
Thank you, sir. That was very informative. And Habiba Parveen had asked that you both have mentioned that the mistakes that we are done unknowingly have effects on the climate change, where we can find information about the rights and wrongs about the climate change in biodiversity, ma'am.
I think Madhvanti can answer probably.
See, to be very frank, we also have very dedicated websites which talk about climate change. If you look at COP26, you will see UNFCCC. Do some Google search about what happened in the Paris Agreement, what is it all about, which are the countries which were a part of it. They will lead you to those websites. Also, the website of the Convention on Biological Diversity, they have a lot of resources on the interlinkages between biodiversity and climate change. So if you do your search on the internet, even a simple Google search will lead you to these websites, which will give you authentic information. And by website, I'm not referring to Wikipedia or just any random blog post. Please go to authentic websites of either international conventions or say these bodies, international, maybe UN bodies or even regional bodies for that matter, or say institutions like the National Biodiversity Authority, where you will find authentic information as to what can be done. And also with respect to virtual internships, if anybody is interested in the legal aspect of environmental law, at the National Law School itself, I'm a part of a center on environmental law education, research and advocacy. So if anybody from the commerce background or say environmental science background is interested to be an intern in our center, although we work primarily in the legal sphere, legal and environment, you can try and apply, but I'm not very sure of other online internships. And there are several NGOs also that are working, which would be willing to take interns. So you have to do your search to find out these places. There are several think tanks which work on the environment. There is something called the Center for Policy Research in Delhi. There is Toxics Link. There are several organizations which have an online presence that work on the environment, biodiversity. So you have to do your search and you will find it. It's there.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, professors, for patiently answering the queries put forth. I would request all the participants to fill the feedback form from the chat box. I now request Sivabharathi to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good day, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for today's session. I express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you assembled here. I would like to thank Mr. P. Natarajan, founder of Namma Oru Foundation, for helping us to conduct this amazing session. I further thank Dr. D. Narasimhan and Ms. Madhubanti Sandhya for scheduling their time to share their knowledge with us. Thank you so much for the enlightening and informative talk, professors. It helped us to understand the significance of biodiversity and the effects of climate change. I would also like to thank our principal, vice principal, all club coordinator, Mrs. Chandini, and club faculty coordinators, Mrs. A. Gayatri and Ms. Dani V, for their encouragement and support. Lastly, I would like to thank the participants for their cooperation throughout the session. We look forward to seeing you all in the further events that we conduct as well. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sivabharathi.
Thank you, Mr. Natarajan. And also thanks to students who are interactive.
Yes, sir.
So they should be motivated constantly. Otherwise, they will lose track.
Correct, sir. That's what I'm trying to do with partnering with them, and looking forward to plan more such events, tying with climate change, with the various aspects of climate change. Thank you, sir. Again, once again, there's a lot of knowledge sharing, and Ms. Madhubanti also from Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. We got a lot of insights on biodiversity and climate change and how these two can be linked. Phenomenal inputs. I couldn't take notes since I'm a moderator. Hope someone from my team would have taken notes, and later on
It is recorded.
Yes,
It is recorded.
yes.